Hello, and welcome back to Does the Shoe Fit? I'm here with Becca again. So exciting. And we're going to talk about the TV show You. So that just recently came out with a new season, season 4. And we wanted to talk about the show in general, the seasons past, and then talk about this season so far. It's not done yet, so it's kind of exciting. But yeah, so Becca, why don't you take us away?
Yeah. I remember in the first season, I was honestly in college watching it with like my roommate at the time, and we would watch it late at night, which was probably not the best decision. But it was just so dark. But it was, you were so like drawn in, you like kept watching. It was kind of like one of those things like a car wreck, and you're like, oh, like what's happening over there? And it's just every episode is like something new, and you're like, what's he gonna do now?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's how they have gotten this far, at least with the show.
That's true. It was interesting. I'm glad the season 4 took the turn that it did, because after season 3, I was like, all right, what else can we really do? It's the same kind of thing. Season 2 was a pretty cool twist, but it's interesting that the biggest thing to me in this whole series is how you're rooting for the killer. You want him to succeed in some weird way. You sympathize with him.
Right, and you get like an adrenaline rush when he gets away with it, because you're like, oh, like we got away with it too.
Right.
Like, we know the secret, and we didn't let anybody else know. To be fair, though, I don't think he would have gotten away with it this far. Like, there's so
no
many
way.
things. I keep waiting. I think he ended up like peeing in a bottle in the first season.
Oh, wow.
In somebody's house, and I don't think he ever went back for it. I might be wrong, but I'm waiting for that
to come back full circle.
Yeah, I could be very wrong. He might have gone back for it, but
if he didn't, that'd be funny. I can't remember. We should have rewatched all the seasons, but who has time for that?
Yeah, like 20 years later, he's maybe settled down and not doing harmful things anymore, and they're like, oh, we have this cold case, and here we find his bottle of pee. Well, I guess that doesn't matter now because he's dead to most of the...
Unless in this season it unravels that he's alive, because it kind of is.
Yeah.
But yeah, that'd be a funny way to, like, his first kill is the first season is what takes him down in the end.
Yeah.
Actually would be a really cool idea. If you're a producer.
Yeah.
This is a good idea.
Yeah. And especially, like, that's not exactly when he first started, but it's closer to the time, so it makes sense that, like, oh, like, he doesn't have good practice doing this, so he's not as careful, or that he seems to be just careful enough to get away with it every time.
Right. And it would be a cool, like, for the watchers, a full circle, like, that's when we watched him do the first stalking or whatever.
Yeah. I think that was the part that was most, like, disturbing, was him just, like, following her and her being like, oh, like, everything's great.
Turn around!
Right.
Like, why are you oblivious?
Yeah, can you just, like, see him? Or, like, oh, he doesn't like your best friend, and now your best friend dies.
Mm-hmm. Coincidence? I think not.
Right, yeah.
No, it's definitely interesting. The stalking makes you think, like, like, how many people, like, do people watch me when I don't realize it? Like, Shutters. I remember there's a scene with Beck where, like, her windows are just wide open, and, like, you can just see completely through without any curtains, and I was like, all right, note to self, always close the blinds.
Yeah. No, I think that is definitely, like, something I remember people saying a lot in the first season was like, okay, we're, like, glorifying this guy who's doing all these things, but I kind of wonder if how many of those people that were saying that were like, oh, like, maybe I'm not being careful, and not that you should have to prevent things. I remember taking a training about, like, bystander intervention, and it was talking about, okay, you have a lot of women who walk with keys in their hands, or the, like, rings that will hurt very much if you get hit by them. So just, like, thinking about that, but you shouldn't have to take those steps. You shouldn't have to prevent somebody from doing something to you. That person should just not be doing what they're doing.
Right. And almost gives like like that, the victim blaming, right?
Yeah.
Like an excuse of like, oh, well, her windows were open. It's like, so doesn't mean
Right.
you should crawl into it or like watch.
Right. And like you're actively making a choice in that moment of,
Right.
okay, like I'm going to not respect this person's privacy or boundaries, regardless of if they have a really sturdy boundary. Like, there are certain things that you should do to respect other people, which not looking in their window would probably be one of them.
Yeah, so. Respecting privacy.
Yeah.
Don't follow people. Don't stalk them.
Don't kill them.
Don't kill them. The big ones.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's also, I like to take it in like a middle ground of like, I'm going to do the things to protect myself because I know that other people are not going to stop themselves, which is unfortunate, and it sucks that it's that way, but I'm not taking the chance for it to not be like that.
Right. Yeah, no, it definitely sucks, and it's kind of like the way that we view like victimization and all of that is basically like, like you have to protect yourself, which isn't totally fair because you're not the one responsible for the other person's actions.
Right.
So it perpetuates the victim blaming, but it also like might be necessary to stop something from happening.
Right. And I know one of like the things as being therapists, one of our fears is like, is one of our clients gonna like become obsessed or like stalk us because like they already have things now. Luckily, I feel like we don't work with clients like that necessarily, but that is like, I think whenever I tell people like, oh, I'm a mental health therapist, they're like, aren't you scared that you're gonna get like stalked? And I was like, that's never crossed my mind, at least in this job. But like, I get like, sure, question mark, but like it does bring up a good point. Like, yeah, if you're working with people like that, they may not know those boundaries, and so we're kind of put in a position.
Right. And I think with being in therapy, you have to kind of acknowledge like, where are the boundaries between being a therapist and being human, and what that interaction looks like as between you and your client. So how much information do I share with this person? Because I'm also from this area right down the street. Okay, right. Well, that's too much information and not something that they need to know about you. But there's other times where it's like, oh, I also, broke my leg when I was 15. Okay, that doesn't tell them anything. It might tell them that, like, oh, like maybe her knee is susceptible to being injured, so that's a good way to take her out. I don't know.
It's a good way to take her out. That's funny.
But yeah, I don't know. I think it just depends on like how, like, the population you work with. Like, there are going to be specific populations or individuals that you work with that you are, maybe a little bit more careful. Like, you're aware of your surroundings in session. Like, hey, maybe I don't have scissors out or a phone with a cord. So.
And hopefully no one sympathizes with those if a client were to do something crazy or whatever, right? Like, but the point going back to like you is like you end up rooting for this guy who is not doing the things that people should be doing, and the victims, like, you almost want him to succeed in either getting away with it or doing that act, which is crazy and almost puts you in this really weird mind space where you're like, why do I agree with this? Because I clearly know it's wrong, but like for the show it's quite entertaining. And I also wonder, so I just had this thought as I was talking, if it almost gives us a glimpse into an unrealistic reality, essentially, that we know we'll never have in real life. Like, I won't be a killer, I'm not going to be a stalker, but it almost gives you a safe way to feel what they feel, or like to feel his empathize, sympathize, root for him, whatever you want to say, but like it's an interesting way of going about it.
Right. And it kind of has you like examine the situation, like, oh, like, I'm sure all of us as kids did something we weren't supposed to, and then like, I used to cut my doll's hair because I thought I wanted to do hair, I guess. And I would hide the hair so that nobody would see it. And
I think that's a great plan.
but I was doing it because I didn't want to get caught, even though you could noticeably tell that the dolls had shorter hair.
Right.
But for him, it's like, okay, you know, I'm in this situation. I don't want to get caught. So now I have to do something. Like, I might have to kill somebody so that they don't know that I did this other thing.
Right. So it's like out of survival, essentially.
Yeah.
Like the instinct to get away with it.
Right.
Or to, it's purposeful.
It's different, though, if your method of survival is like, I'm going to hide my doll's hair versus I'm going to
right.
kill this person and hide them.
Very different, very different. But I guess maybe that's why it's easier for us to sympathize with that character, because he does, in his mind, and since we're seeing it through his mind, kind of shows us, like, this needed to happen, right? It's almost like you said, or what we said before, but in this season, when he gets confronted, he said, like, well, I had to do it, right? It was like a life or death situation. And then we read that and we're like, what was it, though?
Right.
It wasn't.
Right. Like, I had no choice. But it's like, okay, to kill or to not kill. You definitely do have options.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I said to you, like, it's like drinking coffee. Like, okay, I can have coffee with caffeine or I can have decaf, and you can go to the store and you have all of your different options. You can get different flavors, but it's still a choice at that point of like, oh, I definitely could get decaf versus caffeinated. I could not kill this person and literally mind my business and not deal with them at all, or I could involve myself so much, and now I feel like he feels like he's got to do whatever to be in this person's life, which ends up being inappropriate, and then he kills them.
Right. Like, I know it's almost like whenever they go against his idea of them, as well as when he's like, okay, if I can't have you the way I want you, then you'll die too.
Yeah. I think that's an important thing in relationships too, is like, okay, you might have somebody who's started out in a relationship, you're in that like honeymoon phase, or maybe even like an unrealistic expectations where, okay, this person is amazing, and you put them up on this pedestal, and then maybe they snap at you one time, and you're like, oh my gosh, like, who are they? I don't even recognize them. And it's like, okay, they literally said that you suck, but like, and that hurt. But does that mean that they're a horrible person? I don't know. I mean, you get to determine that, but it's like...
Right. Probably depending on the pattern. But, like, you're right. So, people go into relationships with, like, an idealistic version of their partner a lot of times. Like, the first, like you said, the honeymoon phase, essentially, the nice time. And, like, you assume that they will just always be like that, but that is not the case. And then when that becomes reality and it's like, ooh, this isn't who I thought you were, things can go south. Definitely don't resort to murder. Definitely resort to talking about it.
Yeah.
And communicate. But, I mean, yeah, it just goes to show that, you know, in Joe's mind, he was like, well, this isn't what I thought it would be or what I wanted. Like, in both cases, right, with Beck and with Love, he was like, well, with Love, it was like, well, I'm inferior and I wanted to be superior, I think, when it came to Love being a little crazy, too. He wanted to be that person, and then Beck just never accepted him. And then chose different things, and he was like, why would you do that?
Right. And I think with his, I don't even know, is it his ex-wife if she's just no longer alive?
Love?
Yeah.
I think he killed her.
Okay.
And then, like, blew up the house.
Yeah.
By all accounts, she's dead.
Okay. So, for her, like, it also seems like he just gets bored. Like, he's like, oh,
yes.
Like, I don't have this chase anymore, so I'm just gonna go find somebody else, like the neighbor.
And that's a very true thing to happen in real life. People love the chase. I don't know why. I think it's the worst.
I think it's the adrenaline.
It probably is the adrenaline, right? It's that rush, ooh, like, someone doesn't like me, but I'm into them, so I'm gonna, like, get them to like me. Right, and play like the challenge. And then I see this a lot of times with clients and stuff, or it's like, oh, as soon as they had me, they weren't interested anymore. And that does happen, right? Like, the chase is gone and now you're bored, and Joe's just a very extreme version of that, but that idea is true.
Yeah. I kind of wonder if that, like, plays into, like, attachment style, too. Like, how does that person... They obviously don't have a secure attachment because they probably had to chase for some type of relationship, either with friends, family, parents, whoever, growing up. And then maybe it gave them a good result. Maybe it didn't. So then they're like, okay, what next?
Right.
And so then they look for that attachment somewhere else. And I think even when we have, like, clients who are, like, teenagers and they're experiencing their first relationship, or afterwards, if they've broken up, like, why do I feel this way? Well, this is the first, like, attachment you've had really outside of family that's been in a more intense way. And so having to adjust to that too. So there's a lot of strong emotions.
And I think, like, because you're talking about attachment styles, and I feel like Joe's is probably just disorganized. He has no idea what's happening. But it does sound like an avoidant attachment style. It's of somehow, whether it's, like, the disorganized or the avoidant one. But, like, I want you, but I don't want you. Yeah. So that sounds disorganized to me. Like,
yeah. Yeah, like, maybe, oh, but never mind.
Right.
But maybe if there's a chase, then I'll come back.
And the adrenaline part, like you said before. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but in season 1, I believe they went into Joe's relationship with his mom growing up.
I don't fully remember, to be honest.
I don't either, but somehow that, like, came to me.
I know his childhood was, like, horrible.
Yeah. Like, I remember...
something you see with serial killers is a horrible relationship with their parental figure,
right.
Mother figure.
Yeah, most of the time, right? Like, that's a huge theme in that. Like, are they born or are they raised?
Right.
Like, the whole, we had that conversation on the Jeffrey Dahmer episode before. Like, is it nature or is it nurture? It's both, I feel like, or at least a little bit of both.
Yeah, it's a balance, yeah.
But yeah,
it's also, like, if you don't have the nurture, then...
Right.
I mean, I don't think that necessarily means that you go out and stalk people and be doing weird things, but for some people it might end up that way, and that doesn't excuse it, because you have plenty of people who have gone through that and have worked through it and found healthy coping skills to get through it.
Right. There is a better path.
Yeah.
There is a way.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so for the TV show, I felt like season 1 was very intriguing. It was something I don't think ever has been shown like that before. Like, you have Criminal Minds, but that's still seen as the negative, right? Like, you're seeing through the criminal's mind, but you're seeing it as, like, this is what you're not supposed to do. But with Joe, it's like, I know you're not supposed to do this, but I kind of want you to get away with it. Because he is the main character, so it's almost like an anti-hero or an antagonist, but he's the main character, which is it's a very different way of looking at things. Season 2, I thought the twist with love was very cool.
Can you walk me through that?
Yeah.
Because I don't fully remember.
So, it was actually similar to this season, where he did have someone, like, locked in a box. His usual Joe self.
Yeah.
And that woman mysteriously dies, and he thought he killed her. Like, he was out drunk or something and on drugs, or he was like, did I kill her? And we assume that he did, because to the previous knowledge, he's done that before. And come to find out, it was Love who killed her. And that Love is also psycho, and so they were psycho together. But then instantly, Joe became, like, the victim in a weird way.
Yeah, so it's like everybody watching this show sympathizing with him of, like, okay, like, I get why you did that.
Right.
And then when she does it, he's like, how could you? Like...
Right. Oh, you're crazy.
Yeah, but not me.
Right, exactly. And there goes that, like... he can't take responsibility for his own actions, or like blaming the other person and not seeing really what he's doing.
He victim blames a lot too, where he's like,
for sure.
You made me do
this. Gaslighting.
Yeah.
So much. He does a lot of gaslighting.
Yeah.
But you almost, as a watcher, you believe him.
Yeah.
You're kind of gaslit a little bit too.
Yeah. I think that's why it was so like hard for me to watch the first few seasons, was because I was like,
you saw right through it.
It just bothered me. I was like, something doesn't sit right with this. Like, I'm literally watching you kill people, and that feels icky, and then you're blaming them, and I'm still watching.
Yeah, it's almost like, I know it's acting, so I feel like for me, I can separate that, and I'm like, this is really cool, because, like, you don't get to see this, but, like, if it were real, it'd be, like, probably different.
Yeah.
Because then I'd be like, why am I supporting this?
Yeah.
But I don't feel like I'm necessarily supporting it because it's fake. But
right.
Maybe in a way you are.
Yeah. I think I kind of look at it as like, even like with like spooky stuff, I'm like, if I don't participate in that, then it's not there. So
right.
like, if I don't watch a movie about ghosts, which I have in the past, and I sometimes enjoy, but it's almost like, okay, like, yeah, it's not real.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's why I love horror. I'm a big horror person.
I have an easier time with, like, the ghosts, because I'm like, that's not real.
It's not real.
But, like, people are people, and they exist, and that can be a little scary.
Yeah, so that's really funny. I feel like so many people have said that before. Like, I love all of it, and none of it really bothers me, because to me, I'm like, even if this is real or could be real, it's still fake, and, like, that's fine to me. But one of my really good friends, like, she would always be like, I don't like the real stuff because it's real. Like, I don't like serial killer movies or, like, stalker movies or anything that has to do, like, that could be realistic, because then I get freaked out. But, like, ghosts and, like, paranormal stuff she didn't believe in, so she was like, oh, I can totally watch all that. And I was just like, it makes sense. It makes sense. I can just watch all of it.
Yeah, I think it's being able to separate, too. Like, okay, that's not really real. Like, that's not really happening. But when you think about, like, Criminal Minds and stuff, a lot, Law and Order Special Victims, like, they base a lot of those stories off of things that have happened. So you're like, is this real? And then you tie in, like, the news. Like, I also try not to watch the news too much because it's so much and you become, like, desensitized to it.
Right.
So, I don't know. It could go either way.
It definitely can, for sure. But, so, season 2. That's my thoughts on season 2. I didn't see it coming. And I'll talk about season 4, but, like, I saw it coming. But season 2, I remember I didn't expect that. So I was like, you know what? Good on you, season 2.
Yeah.
I did enjoy that twist. What do you remember? Any thoughts?
On season 2 or 3. Is that the one with the little girl and like
yes.
It was her sister?
In the apartment. It was her sister in the box.
I think that's another reason that people have an easier time sympathizing with him is, well, me personally in that season, I was like, oh, like, he's trying to look out for this girl who might not have a whole lot of support, and her sister's doing everything she can, and he's looking out for her too, and you're like, okay, like, he has some moral ground, like, he has some moral stand, but then...
And then he doesn't.
Yeah.
It is interesting because he, like you said, like, he's taking care of this sister, but he took the older sister. Like, he definitely did that, and he definitely put her in a box. Then things got weird, right? Yeah. So, like, but you're right. Like, it's another way to sympathize with him, and also how many good deeds does it take to make up for a wrong deed, right? And it's like... You're almost, like, washing his slate clean. Like, you forget all about season 1 because he's taking care of this girl, and it's, like, a father figure, and you're like, oh, this is great, and you're, like, focusing on that, except for the fact that he's a terrible person and did a lot of bad things.
Right, and that's something I say with clients, too. Like, if they are getting into a new relationship, where's your, like, emotional temperature? Okay, it's out of 10. You're probably being blinded by this, like, infatuation, love, happiness that you're experiencing, which... typically positive feelings, kind of, And then you're like, oh, like I'm ignoring that maybe this person does say really negative things to me and it is a pattern, but it's because they, take me out on dates and they make effort this way. And so you're like blinded.
Yep.
So, like, our emotional response to this show is like, oh, it's entertaining. Like, I have a high adrenaline.
Right.
I'm not having a realistic expectation of what's right and wrong in this moment.
Right. Exactly. And that kind of gives us, and also that safety blanket, right? Of like, oh, this, I'm okay because it's fake and I can watch this and I can root for it. But like, should we maybe think about why we're doing that?
Yeah.
So that's my thoughts on season 2. Season 3 I felt was boring. I'm going to say it.
Yeah.
I didn't like season 3 as much. It was the same stuff. And I'm happy that he killed Love. I kind of got annoyed by her as well, which is funny because I was like, ooh, this is a really good point. The girl villain versus the male villain. I'm a female and I despised Love. I thought she was so annoying, and like I like Joe. And I don't know if there's some like male versus female aspect here to that, whereas like, I definitely am like attraction wise, he's cute. I don't mind him. I like to look at him. So like maybe it's more of like I do tend to like male. It's funny, in movies I tend to like male protagonists, but in books I like female protagonists. I don't know why. Well, we can probably talk about that. But like, so in this show, I just really didn't like Love, and I thought she was crazy, and I forgave Joe for all of his grievances and then did not forgive Love for any of hers. So
I think it's also the way that they portrayed her in this show, though. So like if it had been flipped from her perspective, maybe they could have been justifying it a little bit more.
True.
Like they are for him, because her reasoning is like, oh, like this person's a threat and to my relationship and my family unit. And we think about like wildlife, like you have a lioness who's like, oh, like my child's in danger, I'm definitely going to attack this person.
Right. It's a natural instinct. But somehow we view that as more annoying than Joe's, like,
because he viewed it as annoying.
Because he viewed it as annoying. Exactly. Guess the brainwashing worked on me.
Yeah.
I was gaslit, but I enjoyed it.
I mean, to each their own.
I know. But yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. That's actually, yeah, the show definitely portrayed it that way, so I believed it. I went along with it.
Yeah, I think I'm equally disgusted by both of them.
As you probably should be, to be honest.
But it is a weird, like I still get the adrenaline rush of like, oh, like he's getting away with it, or like, oh, did he do this? And then it was her, and I think that was probably the first, like, strike against her, was like, he's doing everything he can to help this little girl and her sister, and then Love becomes jealous, and so she's like, oh, like, no, you're a threat and I'm gonna take you out, and you're like, no, they were good people.
Yeah.
But I thought that about Beck too. I was like, she's a good person.
Right. I think that with the girl in the box, like the older sister, again, season 2 was a while ago, but I think he wanted to let her out, but then felt like I remember his thoughts of like, crap, I went too far, I want to let her out, but now here we are, and she's seen my face, and like, now I can't, but he was going to let her live, and then Love killed her.
Yeah.
Right. So it was interesting, it's like almost he felt that guilt more than he did with Beck. I don't think he really felt that guilt with her.
He justified it for himself.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
But there was no good reason for him to have done that. And then in the 3rd season, like, we see him in a totally different setting where he's settled down, like the white picket fence and all of that, and by all means supposedly stable. But then it's just like, okay, missing that excitement.
Yep.
Love again perceives, okay, the
Everything
neighbor's
is a
a threat. Yeah, like, I need to protect this unit.
Right.
So, beyond that, it was kind of like, okay.
Yeah, I feel like beyond that, there wasn't really much to it. I guess it does help with, like, slowly working your way into feeling like Joe is a good person, because it just adds to that, like, love is the villain now, like, and there's a truer villain, even though Joe's still cheating on his wife and, like, not doing the best things, but, like, love is worse. So you, like, again, develop that, okay, like, we want Joe to succeed, which leads you into season 4, which is the season that's currently on. There's only 5 episodes out right now, but I really liked it. I'm happy that it was different than what the rest of it was, because again, I was like, where are they going to go with this that's going to be any different? And I was pleasantly surprised. I am a huge whodunit fan. So I was very excited to have, like, and it was great too, like, as the first episode was coming on, and the characters were being introduced, and I was like, oh, it's a whodunit. Like, I called it right away. Yeah, because you can tell, like, the way they set it up, like, and I didn't watch a lot of the previews, because I don't like to be spoiled. I feel like they give a lot away. I just knew the season was coming out, and I knew I liked it, so I knew I'd watch it. Okay. So the way they presented it at that party, when they're, like, him meeting all of these people and they're all in the same room, I was like, I'm so excited. It's a whodunit. Don't know who's dying though.
Yeah. I don't know what I thought was going to happen. He went with following Marianne.
Yeah, they had to, like, tie up that was a weird, I guess they tried to tie up that loose end in, like, the first episode.
I think it'll come back.
I think it's going to come back. Do I want it to come back? Not really.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah, I didn't really care about that relationship as much. I felt maybe because it was like another one.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was like, okay, something's either going to go wrong. She's not going to be the one. And
the only difference is he's followed her to France.
Yeah, it was Paris, then London. Okay. Then he stayed in London.
Europe. He followed her to Europe. So a different setting. Yep. I like that he got, like, a new alias, and he's getting this fresh start. And I think, like, I've also had clients who've been like, oh, like, I just want to move and start over completely. Yeah. And I remember, like, when I moved, I was really young too, and I was like, oh, like, I get a fresh start, like, nobody knows me, like, and I'm an introvert, and I was like, I'm going to be outgoing, and then that's just not who I am. So that didn't happen. So it's like, for him, you know, having that expectation of, like, okay, fresh start.
Not going to kill anyone.
Yeah. And he has.
Did he?
Yeah,
Yes, he did.
Driver or butler.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alerts. But yes, he did end up. But that was his goal, though. It really was that, like, new city, new me.
Right. And it's like, okay, but you are who you are.
Right.
Like, yes, we can make improvements on, like, how we deal with things and interacting with people. But, like, I don't know how much your personality is going to change.
Yeah, probably not by that much.
Yeah.
So, right. But, like you said, it sets up a different vibe for the show to do something a little different, which I think they knew they needed to do, and I'm glad they knew they needed to do that.
Mm-hmm. I don't know where they go from here. I mean, I know we have the rest of the season, and I have no idea where that's going either, to be honest.
I feel like it's going to be like him trying to take the killer down, because now that we know who the killer is, but I almost wish we didn't find out who the killer was in just 5 episodes.
I almost wonder if it's not that person, because I didn't think it was that person. And then I think, like I told you, like, I think his wife is alive somewhere or something, and she's like, I was so convinced that she was, like, watching him, because I was like, who would know all this stuff?
Right.
But
no.
I mean,
well, according to the 5 episodes, no.
It was somebody else, yeah. But
I think Love is dead.
She might be.
I don't know how she would survive what had happened. I also don't remember what had happened.
She poisoned him and then he poisoned her.
And then blew up the house.
Yeah, but I'm like, did she give him less poison than he gave her?
Yeah. I
don't
think
remember.
his body was able to, like...
metabolize it.
Uh-huh. And I don't really remember if he specifically, like, tied her up. Or, like, I remember an oven. I think he put his toes in the oven or something.
That's horrible.
I don't know.
Yeah, I remember him cutting off his toes.
That freaked me out. That was hard to watch. That stuff is hard, but yeah, so this is a spoiler show, so, spoiler alert, but I knew that the guy who did it, who you find out in episode 5, because he was the only likable character. Like, all the other characters were super unlikable, which, makes Joe even more likable, so once again, adding materialistic people to make Joe seem better. Mm-hmm. Now Jonathan, technically.
Right.
And, because his, for those who haven't seen it or don't watch it, his name, he got a new alias, and now he's Jonathan Moore instead of Joe Goldberg.
Yeah.
But... so he's, being Jonathan, trying to do better. All these people around him suck. They are terrible people, and so you like him even more. And then the one guy that was also likable or seemed to have redeeming qualities, and I was like, that has to be the killer.
I think the other play on that, though, is that he is potentially wanting to be a politician.
He did in the last episode. He officially announced his candidacy.
Yeah, and I kind of think about, like, what kind of people typically run for
powerful
office.
Positions.
Yeah. And, of course, I don't think everybody who runs for a powerful position is, like, a horrible person.
Right.
Like, I'm sure they think that they can do some good, but I'm also like, what kind of person do you have to be to believe that you will make such an influence on this world, that you are important enough to be in this office? And I tie that into him of like, okay, so maybe there was something off.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. And like, it takes a lot of ego to feel like you can do a huge change, or like, and yeah, it definitely, politicians I'm always weary of in things, because yeah, they do have like that.
Yeah. It could be like, oh, like, I'm super confident in my ability to lead and all of that, and okay, cool. Or it could be like, I just have an inflated ego and think I can save the world.
Right. Or think I can do better, and like the way I want to do may not actually be better.
Yeah.
Right. Which it kind of seems like, in this show, what is his name? Reese? Yeah. Reese, like, is trying to make the place better, but he's killing his friends who are terrible people. So it goes to show, okay, what is his idea of making the world a better place, or London, or whatever it is.
And he always, I think that was another probably sign that I didn't pick up, but he always was like, oh, this is why this person could have gotten killed. Like, he had another reasoning, but it was still, like, justified of, like, oh, he witnessed Simon do something to one of the artists.
Yep, Blue.
Yeah, and so he was like, well, because, so almost like similar to Joe, like, okay, it's justified because this person's not good.
Right. Exactly. So then, once again, justification. But for some reason, I actually need to think about this. Do I hate Reese? Not really.
I don't think I like him now.
Right, but now, I really liked him in the beginning when I first met him, but now, I'm always team, like, I go back to, I know Joe did bad things, Joe/Jonathan, I get it, but I'm still team Joe. Like, I need him to be...
I think right now I'm team Kate. I like Kate.
Oh, I didn't like Kate. Ooh. Interesting. No, that's a really cool, like, that we both had very different...
Yeah.
Oh, I hated her.
I think she was very, like, stuck up and not likable.
She's not likable.
But I was also like, she has this, like, I don't know, like, way of trying, I think she's trying to, like, protect other people from herself. Which is why she's like that.
The way she is.
because she thinks about, like, her family and how they influenced things and how they weren't good people.
Right.
And that it sounds like she wants to be different, but she's also like, okay, like, I'm born into this. Like, how different am I?
Mm-hmm.
And I think Joe pointed that out in one of the episodes of, like, oh, like, she's helping this person get to rehab. Why would she hide that? She's
Right.
doing something good.
Mm-hmm. Which is also goes to show it's like, if you're good but pretending to be bad, what does that make you? And then Joe's bad pretending to be good. They're almost opposites. And it's like, it's an interesting dynamic for sure. And I wonder if that was kind of like the point, right? Like,
Yeah.
Joe's here trying to be good to make up for his past, and she's trying to be defensive to, she is truly good, but in her environment, right? Your environment plays a huge role.
Right.
In order to survive her environment, she has to play the bad guy.
Right. And I don't think she wants people to see her as soft, so she's like, I have to be
right.
hard.
Right. It's very interesting. And then if you don't relate to that, like, I don't really relate to that, so maybe that's why I don't like it.
Yeah.
And then, like, I don't know, I don't relate to Joe either, but but that goes back to my male versus female dynamic. I wonder if Reese, he's bad pretending to be good. That's also Joe. So, like, I don't know, but
Yeah.
there's so much there to go off of.
Yeah. I don't know. I think Reese was, like, relatable, and he was very, like, human and empathetic towards Joe.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why you like him in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I don't know, when he came out of the woodworks, I was like, what are you doing here? Like, I was caught off guard. I was like,
I wish I was.
who are you?
You were like, oh, another person. The minute I saw,
I was like, he's
male.
coming to save the day. No.
No.
He's going to tie you and your friend up in the basement and set it on fire.
Yeah.
They both like fire.
True.
Maybe they should be buddies
They
and
should be friends.
share a cellmate.
To be fair, Jack, my fiance, is really good at these things as well, picking them out. And I'm pretty sure the episode, which was probably episode 1, when the student of, like, Jonathan's student gave him the book about Reese, Jack was like, he's the killer. And I was like, how do you do this?
Yeah.
And then when I met him at the party and he was actually likable, and I was like, dang it, he's probably the killer. And then he did end up being the killer.
I'm good with, like, the crime shows. Like, I can normally figure out who it is. Like
CSI or whatever, where they...
More like Law and Order. I don't think I watched, like, CSI. But I remember watching Law and Order, and I'd be like, it's them. Because they go through, like, 3 different people that it could be, and I'm like, it's them. It's close enough to the end. Like, it's them.
Right, the way that it portrays in the show.
Yeah, but I'm like, that might have been more obvious to me, other than, like, okay, there's so many options. And I guess he wasn't at the, like, mansion or whatever that they were at.
No, and that's also how I know is him, because I was like, he's the one person who's not there, so clearly it's going to be him who's, like, actually there, you know?
Should have known. I thought it was the other guy that was really protective of Kate for a while.
Which one? Oh, Rolf?
Yeah.
Rold?
Yeah.
Rolf.
I don't know his name.
It was a name that was hard to pronounce. It's like Rold. I've never heard of the name before, so it was different.
Yeah.
I thought originally that it would be the guy who was drunk a lot, because he's a forgettable character. Because it's either a likable character, a forgettable character.
The other American?
Yes. No. Yeah.
No.
Maybe. No. The other American was too much of a main character.
Okay.
He's a forgettable character. That's why I thought it was him. On the couch scene, he was asleep with the sword.
I don't remember this.
Clarence or something? I can't remember his name.
What did he look like?
He looked like Joe.
Oh. Okay.
He almost, like, had the dark hair, dark facial hair.
Not ringing any
Drank a lot. But that's the point, right? Is that he's a forgettable character, and a lot of times it's the forgettable character. Not this time.
Yeah, not the one that you always, like,
right,
expect.
that you're always thinking of in the list of things. Like, he's not in the list, so sometimes that means it's them.
How soon did you know it was him?
Reese?
Yeah.
Pretty early on. Because he was likable. But I was between Reese, that other guy who's forgettable, and at one point I was thinking it could be the girl who was in, the student. I can't remember her name either.
Oh, yeah.
Mainly because she was knowledgeable about whodunits. And I thought maybe that would be, like, they'd come back around to that, and she was, like, helping him knowingly, but no, it wasn't her. But, which was really cool, though, in that scene, when she was like, oh, it's a whodunit, and, like, talking about the book and, like, helping Jonathan out with it, it's, like, a very, like, meta experience where, like, the show is talking about the show in a way, which reminded me of my favorite movies, the Scream franchise. They do that. So, like, in the first movie of Scream, Randy, a character, is like, in horror movies, you don't say I'll be right back, you don't go anywhere alone, like, don't have sex, like, all the rules of a horror movie, like, in a horror movie. So it's just, like, funny, like, these are the rules of a whodunit in a whodunit, and it just made me think of that, and I thought that was pretty cool. I don't know if it was on purpose, it might have been, but...
I think it probably was. There's, like, a word for it, I remember.
There's a word for it. I don't know that much about it, but
yeah,
I just know that it's there.
Yeah, I think it's just, like, a writing style that, like...
It's pretty popular right now.
Yeah. Well, I even think it used to be popular, like, probably, like, Shakespeare or Edgar Allan Poe. Like, those types of writers used it. So it's a very... Like, it's popular. It goes over. It's well received, so...
Exactly. So, I know we're coming up on our time here. So, overall, the show You, does the shoe fit? I mean, there's a lot here. We talked a little bit about what's realistic, what's unrealistic. Mainly, I would say it's mainly unrealistic.
That for him to get away with everything? Or?
Yeah, like yeah, if you're looking at it like that, like, would this be realistic for him to be able to do these things, get away with it, go to Europe somehow? No. Would he do, like, hop a boat? Like,
right.
If you're looking at it like that, it's pretty unrealistic. So the shoe doesn't fit in that sense, I think. But if you look at it like, there are some lessons here, right? There are some things with, like, that we talked about, the trope of, you know, the adrenaline rush of I gotta catch you and then I don't want you anymore, and that's a realistic thing. This is an extreme version of that.
Yeah.
But there has some stuff in there.
I think to that point, like, the shoe just wouldn't fit, like, at all, because, like, if we want to, it's like Cinderella, like, it either does or it doesn't fit, and if it, like, I think her stepsisters, when they would try it on, like, it would not go in, and so, because it's to the extreme,
that's true,
on everything, yeah, it doesn't fit.
That is true. Now, I do think it does a good job of being entertaining.
Yeah.
It's entertaining, and it is unique in its style of really having you sympathize with a serial killer stalker guy.
Yeah.
Which Becca doesn't like. I think it's fantastic. I love how we have completely different views on it, because it makes it so much more interesting.
Yeah. It's icky.
It's icky?
That's the only word I have to describe it.
I've never felt... I don't want to say that necessarily, but I don't really feel icky when watching it.
I think I feel about the show how you felt when he cut his toes off.
Okay, there you go. I did feel icky during that part. I was like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
I now know why, but I was like, I don't think I could do that.
No.
I think I'd die.
Yeah. No, I'm good.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, thank you for listening or watching, and we'll be back eventually.